tuned in to the 49ers Rush podcast, and here is your host, John Chapman.
All right, 49ers fans, the NFL draft has concluded. I'm your host, John Chapman with the 49ers Rush podcast, and holy cow, what a weekend. Just want to say thanks to everybody that came out. I met up with a couple people, a couple listeners who reached out to me on Twitter. We had a really good time. Probably too good of a time. Turns out whenever you drink for 10-plus hours in Nashville, might result in you trying to steal a taco truck. Unsuccessfully, unfortunately. But it was a heck of a weekend. Nashville really was a fun place. You know, I've been to the last 5 drafts ever since they moved out of New York, and man, it was quite interesting to say the least. Nashville did a good job. The worst part about it was there were so many people, the cell phone system crashed almost completely, so you couldn't use your internet. So apologize for not posting, but the audio was just so bad I just couldn't get out there. But today what we're going to do, we are going to focus on the 49ers' the fourth pick in the second round, pick number 36 overall, wide receiver Deebo Samuel. So this is all about Deebo episode. That's what we're doing here. So he's out of South Carolina. He's a redshirt sophomore, so he's played 5 years in college. So he is 23 years old already, which isn't, it's not too bad. It's not ideal, but he is a little bit older. The fact that whenever he showed up, freshman year at South Carolina, he was ready to go. And so we're going to go through basically scouting notes, coaching film, comparisons, stats, analytics, all those things. There's a bunch of stuff to talk about with this guy. So this is a all-on Deebo Samuel episode. So real quick, let's just get into kind of his height, weight, speed type things. And it's interesting because he went super early in this draft. I mean, if you look at just the wide receivers that were drafted, he went 3rd wide receiver overall, and there was not another wide receiver drafted after him for 15 picks. It goes Marquise Brown 1, N'Keal Harry 2, Deebo Samuel 3. I don't think very many people had their rankings out where he was 3rd. I think, a few people had him in that kind of 3, 4, 5 range, but to be the 3rd wide receiver off the board was quite interesting. I liked him a lot. I had him in the tier to go in the second round, and I'm not too surprised that he went there just because he fits what Kyle Shanahan loves. And so let's jump in and talk about that. 5'11", so he's a little short for a top-tier wide receiver. That puts him in the 28th percentile. And Kyle Shanahan was asked about this. They said, it seems like you guys don't have that top, deep threat, that, huge height, weight, speed guy. And Kyle Shanahan said, I don't think that you have to be tall to be a deep threat. I think that, speed and power, those are the things we look for. But height necessarily shouldn't fit into that. And we see that with trading up to draft Dante Pettis, Trent Taylor, which they don't really use him to go deep at all. And now with Deebo Samuel. So not a big height guy. Weight 214 pounds, and that's the thing. 5'11", 214, that's basically Le'Veon Bell. And that's what he looks like out there. He's very, very stocky. He is a bulky wide receiver that's a skill guy, yards after the catch guy, big time. Wingspan, 75-inch. That's pretty low, 32%. Arm length, 31 inches. That's 32%. Those two things usually correlate. Hand size, 10 inches. That's pretty big for a 5'11 guy. That's going to put him at 86%, and his catch percentage does reflect that big time. 40-yard dash, he is a 4.48 guy, and that speed shows on film. He's not leaving much out there as far as speed goes. He does get caught from behind on some of his slant routes, but again, that's after a 50 to 60-yard game. So, no, I don't think any coach is going to complain about that. Vertical jump, 39 inches, beyond impressive there. That puts him in the 87th percentile. Broad jump, 122 inches, 62 percentile. 3-cone drill. This was the most interesting for me because up until this point, almost every single wide receiver that Kyle Shanahan has brought in has had a sub-7 3-cone drill. He comes in right at that 7.03 second, which is 35 percentile. That's not that great. That is actually pretty bad for a guy under 6 foot. Usually, the guys under 6 foot are pretty shifty. Now, whenever you watch his film, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, his favorite route is the slant. I put out a video earlier today, which has been picked up by a lot of the Niners websites, of just a compilation of about 8 plays of him just running slants. And it's a highlight reel waiting to happen. He is unbelievable. I believe Brian Peacock, host of the Locked On 49ers, he tweeted out that on slant routes, Deebo averaged 31 yards per catch. Just on slant routes alone, which is beyond crazy. He is a slant master. And as you know, Kyle Shanahan and his offense, you can go look at all of Dante Pettis' highlights. The majority of them come off the slant. Now, he doesn't run the slant as well as Dante Pettis. I would argue Dante Pettis runs it as well as anybody in the NFL. But what he does after he catches the ball is elite. 20-yard shuttle, or the short shuttle as it's called, 4.14 seconds. That's 68th percentile, and the bench press, 15 reps. So nothing too special there. That's going to put him just in the 56. So it puts him right on average with most of the people in the NFL. Now, if you go to mockdraftable.com, what they do is they do basically a spider web or a web graph where it shows you how they fit with other people. And his comps, if you click on wide receiver, you get certain wide receivers, but the majority of his comps that's more accurate are running backs. He does not have a wide receivers build. So just based off of, putting all this information into the system, Ty Montgomery out of Stanford, you get Bissy Johnson out of Colorado State. A lot of people don't know him. Kenny Irons out of Auburn, running back in 2007. Julius Jones, running back, Notre Dame, 2004. John Crockett, running back. Mike Goodson, running back, Texas A&M. Damian Harrison, Andre Dixon, he was a big one, running back out of Connecticut. And again, these are the types of guys that he matches up with. A lot of people are calling him kind of a Pierre Garçon clone. And they're close, but the arm length is different. The bench press is a little bit different. But these are the types of players, not necessarily play style. This is just 100% metrics. And I usually don't do player comparisons off of metrics, but it just lets you know the type of body type, speed, and explosiveness that this guy has. My player comparison was Jarvis. I kept going back between these three, but this is going to let you know the type of player he is. Jarvis Landry coming out of college, a very similar grade, but he's way faster. You also had a lighter version of Anquan Bolden because he's so physical and he catches everything, but he's nowhere near the size there. Also had Golden Tate but less shifty, where again it's a lot of this catch the ball, make moves. And even just if you go last year, DJ Moore, wide receiver that went to the Carolina Panthers. But this is the type of explosive power running back type guy. Get the ball in his hands, great things are going to happen. So having said that, let's jump through all of the coaching scouting notes. Now, the number one thing that stood out to me right off the bat is yards after catch stud. That's what he is. Bill Walsh would be very proud of this guy because once he gets the ball in his hand, it's just insane. Now, if you want to watch one specific game film, go watch the Clemson game because he is playing against some top-tier defensive prospects, and you see the good and the bad in that game. And initially, whenever I started ranking him, I'm not going to lie, he disappears at times. He's not. He wasn't a part of the best offense, but I want to focus on what he can do. So some of the analytics jump out pretty quick. As far as deep balls, these are balls that traveled over 20 yards in the air. He only caught 4 out of 15. So that's a problem, but a lot of that had to do with his quarterback play. It was awful. It was really, really bad. He did take 70 snaps in the slot, and he had 11 drops on 223 targets for a 66% catch rate, and that is unbelievable for what he was working with. So those are top-tier numbers as far as catches. 11 drops on 223 targets, just to keep that in mind. DK Metcalf had about 17 drops on less than half of those targets. So now his touchdowns are quite interesting, and it depends on how you really want to look at it. Because if you want to break it down year by year, you can do that. Now, there's some major injury concerns with this player, as there are with almost all 49ers players that are drafted or free agency now. That's just kind of what we do. But if we just look at what he did his senior year, which was his only complete year, he played in 12 games. He had 62 catches, 882 receiving yards. He averaged 14.2 yards per carry with 11 receiving touchdowns. Now, the touchdowns are interesting for him because he gets them in a multitude of ways. So if we look at his career, we kind of step back and look at the entire forest. He's responsible for 30 touchdowns, okay? Career touchdowns over 4 years. Now, he only played, what's that going to be, 12. So this is the amount of games he played each year due to injury, and we'll talk about that in a second. Freshman year, all these are redshirt years, by the way. So he redshirted his first year. Redshirt freshman year, 5 games. Sophomore year, 10 games. Junior year only played 3 games. Senior year played 12. He chose to send out the bowl game to prepare for the draft, but then he played the Senior Bowl. So he wanted to show, and a big reason why he was drafted by the 49ers is because we were able to coach him there, and they absolutely love the guy. So if you look at that, he's played 30 career games, and he's responsible for 30 touchdowns over that time. Now, the way that he gets them are very interesting. 16 receiving touchdowns, 7 rushing touchdowns, 4 kickoff returns for touchdowns, which is beyond impressive. One of the top. He's the all-time SEC leader in kickoff return touchdowns. 2 passing touchdowns, and 1 fumbled punt return for a touchdown. Because sometimes he's the punt returner, sometimes he's the up back blocking the gunner on the opposite side. Sometimes he's the gunner, and sometimes he blitzes off the edge on punt return team. So this guy literally has scored in every possible way. Rushing, passing, kickoff return, fumbled punts. I mean, the guy just does everything. So, again, everything that he does is after the catch, which is what makes him elite, is if you just get the ball in his hands, he's a jet sweep guy, he's speed, he's powerful, reverses, screens, whatever you can do, that's what makes him special. Now, back to those injuries. I'm trying to balance the positive and the negative here. I do like Deebo Samuel a lot. I really do think that he fits in exactly with what Kyle Shanahan does. However, our current front office and our past front office, they no issues with injury concerns, and they just wipe them off the slate. They really do not care. He had a broken leg, which that one I'm fine with. The term injury prone is used far too often, and broken legs have nothing to do with injury concern, I am convinced of. Now, soft tissue stuff does scare me, and he has had several hamstring issues that have spanned over 2 years. His freshman year, his very first game that he got to play in, the very first route he ran, he pulled his hamstring, or strained his hamstring, however they wanted to term that. But you watch him, usually whenever you see somebody running full speed and they just let up and immediately reach for that top part of the hamstring where it touches the glutes. I used to coach track and football. Almost always whenever that happens, it's going to be a severe strain or a pull. And he was out for 7 weeks, so you can do with that what you want. Then he's going to have ankle issues, and the hamstring issue came back the very next year. So this is something that is going to have to be monitored. We saw it with Jimmy Ward just, a year ago whenever he steps out and we were finally wanting to rely on the guy, and he pulls his hamstring during his conditioning test, which is 100% just being unconditioned and dehydrated. Conditioning test, you don't do sprints. That's not what NFL does. You're just doing gassers back and forth. He showed up unprepared. Anyway, I don't want to get off on my soapbox. So, they asked this question to John Lynch, and he said, with any type of injury, we make sure our medical staff is good with it, and they said they're good with it. So they hear that, and they're just 100% fine with everything. Now, some of the issues with his game is it depends on if you are watching his film, at South Carolina, or if you're watching Senior Bowl film. Because during the Senior Bowl, this kid was lights out. And so you watch the one-on-one practices and all that stuff. This kid is a gamer. You talk about the effort. He is all in all the time. He doesn't leave much out on the field. Sometimes blocking his efforts not elite. It's usually good, but sometimes he will turn around and watch his ball carrier get tackled, which is problematic. But usually he fires off with a lot of anger and effort. But during the season, and in almost all of his game film outside of the Senior Bowl, he does get jammed at the line of scrimmage too often. Now, the reason why is interesting. It's not so much his footwork. He is a stem specialist. It looks like he's playing basketball at the top of his route, where like you'll see his arms come out and almost like try to do a juke move, and he's really, really good at that. But the problem is at the line of scrimmage when he's playing against press man, which in the SEC you're going to see, he leaves his chest wide open. And so as he's doing his footwork, his stem to try to get to the side or to press the corner, he'll get jabbed just straight in the chest. Now what's different about Deebo is he's so damn strong. A lot of times the corner will get a clean shot on him, but it doesn't slow him down too often. Now if you do that in the NFL against, somebody like Patrick Peterson in our division, you're done. Like it's over. If Patrick Peterson hits you, he's going to knock the breath out of you. So this is something that he's going to have to work on, but it's not really something that I'm too concerned about because he's shown that he is so strong. If you just correct a couple technique things and minimize that target for corners, it's something that he's going to be able to do very, very well with. And it's funny, he's playing against Clemson, Trayvon Mullins, who, goes in the second round. I think he might have went in the first round, but he was in that first to second round tier. He'd hit him straight in the chest, and Deebo would kind of pop back and hesitate, and then he still scored a touchdown on a slant route. So just something he's going to have to figure out. The kid is a fighter. He goes all out on every play. Now, the problem is there are certain types of coverage where he disappears because he does not get a lot of separation on routes versus the trail technique. He is a speed, physical guy, and if you're playing off man, almost all of his highlights come off that. A mirror and match or a press and trail technique, again, you're going to try to disrupt the timing of the route early, and then you just kind of play Simon Says and you follow him around. He struggled with this big time. Zone coverage, no problem. Just straight man, usually not as much of a problem. But off man, good Lord. Bail technique, no worries. But that kind of stay in the hip pocket with safety help over the top, which a lot of the NFL is trying to run nowadays, that is problematic for him. So, great stem work, as I said. The big problem that he had was the quarterback in the offense. So you could tell the offensive coordinator that was at South Carolina, he decided to find every way possible to get this guy the ball. He had 25 rushing attempts. So you're talking jet sweeps, reverses, any way possible. He even lined up in the backfield, kind of a two running back set, and ran counters. It's the old high school counter tray play where you have the quarterback in shotgun and you've got one running back on each side, and they run the same exact motion, both running backs, and he got first downs with it. Now, I will say this. He plays everywhere as far as these are just the positions I've counted. I've gone through, I think, 10-plus game films of him. Inside wide receiver, outside wide receiver, slot to the trip side, flanker position where he kind of lines up behind the tackle, running back, wing off of the tight end, punt returner, punt gunner, kickoff return, and punt rusher. Like the dude just goes everywhere. So very versatile, and it helps a lot that we do have the most versatile coach, probably offensive coach in the NFL, at least one of those. Now, I'm about halfway through with my evaluation on him, but before I do, I just want to say thanks to my sponsor, Game Day Sports and Memorabilia. These guys have been with us for a long time, and they've given us a bunch of stuff to give away to you guys, and just want to say thank you for all the support to them. And for you guys. I love giving away free stuff, and I'm hoping to have something here soon. We are working out another ad campaign where we can give away some great stuff. So I will be reaching out with them again soon. And again, anything you need for your sports team, just head over there, Game Day Sports and Memorabilia. Let them know the 49ers Rush podcast and John Chapman sent you. They're just easy to deal with, and everything is fully guaranteed and backed by a Beckett warranty and guarantee plus. So the stuff that you know you're getting, you know it is legit. Now, he's a decent blocker, but he doesn't always block the same. A few times you'll see him get kind of pissed off and taken out on the corner, which is great. You'll see him decleat some safeties that are, not looking coming across the field. That's great. But sometimes, man, he'll go out to block and he'll make initial contact with his arms and then just kind of turn around and watch the play. I hate that. I can't stand it. But the majority of the time, his blocking is just running a fade route. So it'd be a run to his side, and if they're doing press man, he just runs an outside fade, so the corner just runs off, and he doesn't have to block him at all. So curious to see, as we watch a training camp and all that, this is one of the things I want to keep an eye on. One, his chest against press man, and two, what does his blocking effort look like? So, as I said earlier, elite slant route. He is just unbelievable at it, and a big reason why teams have to be scared is because the 4.4 speed and how he adjusts to the deep ball makes him a scary, scary player deep because, like I said, his quarterback was bad, but he did throw a soft pass. And so what I mean by that, it wasn't like a Colin Kaepernick bullet. It was he'd put air under it and just let his guy go get it. And this kid, Deebo Samuel, he adjusts to the ball in the air absolutely bananas. Now, his catch radius isn't great, but when that ball's in the air, I guarantee you this. His body control and body adjustment is level 10. If you just give him something to go get, he's going to go get it. Now, he's not a 6'4", 6'3" dude. He does have the 39-inch vertical, but I guarantee you this. I have yet to see anybody take the ball away from him or bat the ball away from him. If the ball's close, the kid's catching it. He's just an absolute dog when that ball's in the air. And it's a lot of fun because you just see him tracking it so well. As I said earlier, all-time leader in the SEC for 4 kickoff returns. I think that he will play that role for us early. I think you have Dante Pettis and Trent Taylor as our punt returners. And then you've got Raheem Mostert and Deebo Samuel are going to be our kickoff returners. And if for some reason Mostert doesn't make the roster, I think that he will. You'd put Breida back there. He'd probably be the third guy. Now, it's quite interesting, and some people knocked him because he chose not to play in the bowl game before the draft. I have absolute zero problems from this. And, there's a really cool YouTube video out there called the Deebo Samuel story where they go back through his life. And it's pretty cool. It's about a 10-minute video where, Deebo, Deebo's his nickname. That's the funny thing. He got this nickname because he bullied kids whenever he was in trouble, and they named him after the movie Friday. So he goes by Deebo, and it talks about how he looked up to his older brother, and his brother ended up getting arrested several times over for aggravated assault and burglary breaking and entering charges. And so just how through that process he had to grow up because his older brother who he looked up to was gone. And, throughout this process, the brother's now out of prison, and even though he's still the older guy, he looks up to Deebo. And Deebo, there's not a lot of character concerns. John Lynch even said, whenever we were coaching him during the Senior Bowl, he was one of the first ones out to practice every day. And he would be over at the jugs machine or with punts, the punt team, just practicing returns. He's just a guy that loves football. He's got a huge smile on his face all the time. And if you watch some of the videos or interviews of him, he's just one of those guys that just seems to be enjoying where he's at and working beyond hard to make sure that he gets everything that he wants. So, absolutely love this guy. Now, where I had him ranked, I had him as my number 50 overall player. And a big reason why I had him there is because there's just this huge cluster of wide receivers that I expected to go in the second round. And this isn't necessarily a criticism. It's just I think this tells you exactly how much Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch valued him because he was a perfect fit. While he was on the clock, all of these wide receivers were still left. A.J. Brown, who I think almost everybody had ahead of Deebo Samuel, and, very similar play style. They were both there. And so, whenever we came on the clock in the second round, I said, man, we need to trade back. If we could drop back 5 picks, there's 2 wide receivers, which, a lot of people said that's what we were going to do. I was fine with that if we traded back, but we took Deebo anyway, and no wide receiver went for the next 15 picks. And so what does that mean? This means that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch said it's not worth it. There's such a gap between Deebo Samuel and A.J. Brown that we don't want to risk falling down to A.J. Brown. We are going to take this guy right now, despite there being so many wide receivers that were still on the board. I mean, literally, when we took him, A.J. Brown was there, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Andy Isabella, DK Metcalf, Jalen Hurd was there, Miles Boykin, Hakeem Butler, Ryler Ridley. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. There's so many, almost every wide receiver was still there. So that just needs to instill confidence in the 49ers that this was their guy. And if that's the case, and they had him ranked as their, top 3 wide receiver, or probably even higher than that, because I doubt that they liked N'Keal Harry as much just because he's a different type of wide receiver. That is something that is exciting and something to look forward to. Now, what does this mean for the 49ers? And I'm going to be doing another episode, hopefully this week, on Jalen Hurd, which I love me some Jalen Hurd. I actually had Hurd ranked 1 spot ahead of Deebo Samuel in my wide receiver ranks. Take that for whatever you want. But our wide receiver core, the 49ers wide receiver core, is deep. Listen to these names, and they're in no particular order. Dante Pettis, Jordan Matthews, Kendrick Bourne, Marquise Goodwin, Trent Taylor, Richie James Jr., Max McCaffrey, Stephen Dunbar Jr., Jordan Smallwood, Deebo Samuel, Jalen Hurd. We only kept 6 wide receivers last year. So there's going to be some top-end talent that is not going to be kept on this roster, because what was a major concern was addressed severely. So anyway, that's the Deebo Samuel episode. You don't mess with Deebo. I'm so excited to see him just step in. He's going to be playing that Z, the same Pierre Garçon spot, day 1. I would not be surprised if he starts the very first play. He's going to be out there. So anyway, thanks. If you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe. 49ers Rush Podcast is available anywhere you get your podcast, including where you are listening to this one now. Just want to say thanks, guys, and I will be back with more draft breakdowns for the 49ers.